Hey, this is MJ, and in today's tutorial I'll be showing you how to make this beautiful color block sweater. The yarn that I'm using is Palette from WeCrochet, and I've chosen 3 colors for my design: Oyster Heather, Brindle, and Asphalt Heather. You'll need 2 crochet hook sizes for this pattern, a G 4mm and also a G plus, which is the 4.5mm. I'll be using the 4mm for the bands, and for the body we'll be using the larger hook. So let's begin with our 4mm crochet hook, and we'll make a slip knot and put that on the hook. We'll begin by chaining 12. Now we'll work a half double crochet in the 3rd chain from the hook. 1, 2, 3. And a half double crochet into each chain across. So you'll have a total of 10 half double crochets. Okay, and then when we get to the end of the row, so you should have 10 stitches, we'll turn and chain 1. And then we're going to be working in the back loops only of each stitch across. So yarn over, go through the stitch, going through the back loop only, completing your half double crochet. So the ribbing for the collar of the sweater is all going to be worked in half double crochets in the back loop only. So each row now is just a repeat of row 2. And you want to work so that you have a total of 80 rows. Now I do suggest you count so that you don't lose track. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I have 10 stitches. So if you keep counting, you know that you won't lose or add a stitch as you work. So I'm going to complete working my rows off camera, and then I'll meet you back. So you're just chaining 1 at the beginning of every row and working half double crochets into the back loop of every stitch. Okay, so I've worked up a total of 80 rows. Now what we'll do is chain 1, fold the band together, and then we'll slip stitch to join the band. Okay, so for slip stitching, we're going to go through the stitch, go across to the other side of the band, and pull through. Go through the stitch and through to the other side. And just repeat this all the way along. Now flip the band so that your seam is to the inside, and then we'll work around the band in single crochet stitches, and we want a total of 120. So what that will mean is for every 2 rows we're doing 3 stitches. So what I just like to do is I just do 1 row, I'll add 2 stitches, and then the next I'll just add 1 stitch. The next row I'll add 2, and then the next row 1. So just repeat that pattern all the way around, and you should end up with 120 single crochet stitches. Okay, so I've slip stitched to join, and now we'll chain 2, and we'll work double crochets into every stitch around. So a total of 120 stitches. Now I've also switched over to the 4.5 millimeter crochet hook at this point. So we're working just simple double crochet stitches, and that will help this sweater work up fairly quickly. Okay, so once you've worked all the way around, you're going to want to do a reverse slip stitch join. So take your yarn, keeping it to the front, go from back to front through the stitch, and then just grab your yarn and pull it through and chain 2. Now we'll begin increasing. So the increase pattern, we will work 9 double crochets, and then we'll do 2 in the 10th stitch. We'll do 9 and then 2 in the 10th stitch. The next round we'll increase by working 10 and then 2 in the 11th stitch. And we're going to increase in this manner. So I'd like you to follow along with your pattern now, and you're going to just continue increasing until you reach your desired size. So I'll work this first increase with you. So we'll work 9 double crochets and then an increase. So I've worked 9 stitches, and then I'll do 2 double crochets into the next stitch. Okay, and then we're just going to do another 9, increase again. So this round each round will go up by 12 stitches. So we're going to increase from 120 up to 132. So I'm going to continue increasing the yoke of my sweater, and then I will meet you up once I've reached my desired size. Okay, so I've been working and I'm currently at 312 stitches in total. So here are the other 2 colors that I'm going to be using for my sweater. So Brindle Heather is the color that I'm going to switch to next. We're going to finish off with Asphalt Heather. So I wanted to change my color on the last round before I do the armhole, and that's just going to make the armhole nice and seamless. I didn't want to go too far at this point with the cream color, so let's change over to Brindle before we begin separating for the arms. So it doesn't matter what size you're working on. The last round before the separation of the sleeves, the armholes, and the body, I want you to change over to the next color. So if you're working on a larger size, you're going to have a little bit more of your cream color. If you're working on a smaller size, you're going to have a little bit less. But just follow along with your pattern. And now what we'll do is change color. I'm ending with that decreased stitch. We'll pull through 2, and then we'll pull through the last 2 with our new color. Okay, and we'll do the reverse slip stitch join to join this up. And then I just like to give my tails a tug. Chain 2. Okay, so now you could crochet over some tails as you go if you want to save on a little bit of weaving. So just put the tails over top of the hook as you go through. So now one little trick that I found as I was working, it's really easy actually to see where you need to increase. So as you get to your increase section, you can see your 2 stitches from the previous round. You're always going to be doing that decrease in that second stitch of that increase. So as I got going, instead of counting all the time, I was just making sure that I was doing the increase. Now it's always good to count the odd one just to make sure that you've stayed on track. But that kind of makes it simple when you're working. If you're just, this is actually really works up really quickly. You can watch TV while you're doing it. Take it with you in the car if you're at an appointment. Really, you don't have to think a lot about it, and the double crochet stitches work really fast. So if you just know that you're always doing that increase there, and you'll see how the increase works as it goes. And as long as your stitch count is good, you shouldn't have any issues. It should work out. You'll also notice looking at this how seamlessly that join is blending in. Because you are going to see those increases as you go around the sweater, the join and the increase there, it really makes it, and as you can see, we haven't curved any more than anything else. So you're having these panels of increases, and this is just blending right in. So it makes the sweater, even though we have that join, you're not going to notice. So I'll work across over, I'm almost actually to the increase now. So I'm just going to finish and I'll show you how I increase when I come here. So there I know I'm coming to that increase section of the previous round, coming to that second stitch of the increase, and now I'll add my 2 doubles in that stitch. So now I'm going to continue working the increase all the way around. After this round, we'll be up to 324 stitches. So I just cut, and I had about this much left on my second ball for the medium size. Okay, so I finished working this round and I went ahead and steam blocked it. This now is was the last round where we're going to be able to have the yoke laid out nice and flat. So I didn't aggressively block it or anything. I just steamed it just to flatten out the edges, giving it that nice pressed look. Your collar will just really nicely cinch in. You just want to use your fingers just to kind of make it cinch in like that. And then I just steamed it. So what I also did next is I added my stitch markers for the body and sleeves. I have lots of pictures included in the pattern. So if you're following along, I've shown you pictures of how I've done this. So for my size, I needed to section off 69 stitches for my first armhole. So I counted across 69. Now I know I have 27 stitches here, 27 stitches here, so that's 54. So I was able to easily count across to get my 69 stitches. And then next I needed to mark off half of my body, which was 93 stitches. So then I needed to count over, and I added another stitch marker at the 93 stitch mark. Okay, so I have 69 stitches, then I have 93 stitches, and then I needed to section off the next sleeve. So we're just alternating. So sleeve, front or back, sleeve. So I've now marked off here another 69 stitches for my next sleeve. And then you should have remaining 93 stitches up to your join. So everything's sectioned off now. I can't get this whole piece really on camera, but I've got everything marked. So now when I go to do the next round, I know exactly what I'm doing. So we'll pull this back. So I'm going to do this this reverse slip stitch join, now to join up. And now follow along with your pattern for the size for what you need to mark out. So now I'm going to chain 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This will be the chain that goes under the arm. Now what I'd like you to do is slip stitch into the stitch after the marker. Okay, so we have 69 stitches here for our sleeve opening. And then we have, so 69, and then we have our chain of 6. So our sleeve will actually be 69 plus 6, so 75 in total when we work around that sleeve. Now what we need to do is work a double crochet and a double crochet in each of the next 93 stitches across, which we do have marked, but you can count as well just to make sure you're on track. Okay, so I'm coming up to my 93rd stitch, which is in the stitch marker. And then we'll chain 6. Okay, and then we're going to be skipping over the next 69 stitches. Okay, so 69 is up to the marker, so we'll just slip stitch into the next stitch, and then we'll double crochet into that same stitch. You can just go and double crochet into it as well. It's just a slip stitch kind of secures things a little bit better. Okay, so now we're working across the next body section. So we'll be working across another 93 stitches, and that should bring us all the way to the join, and then I'll work across my doubles and then I'll meet you up again. Okay, so I've worked across 93. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to slip stitch in the first chain to join. Okay, and then we're going to fasten this off. And we're going to weave that tail in. And the reason I'm fastening off is I'm just going to join into the center here as we continue working this pattern, because I want my join to be in the center of the underarm. So before I progress, I'm just going to deal with my ends that I have just to get them cleaned up and out of the way. So you can just take a minute and do that, and then that will save you the hassle later. Okay, and this one as well. So I crocheted over them one way, but I'm going to make sure that I weave them back in the opposite direction to make sure that the tails are secure. Make sure you don't distort your work. And then also this tail here. So now I'm going to join into the 4th chain of my chain 6. And I will chain 2 and work a double crochet in that chain. And you should, it's kind of, mine got a little bit snug and tight there, but you should have 2 more chains to work into. So I'm just going to fiddle and get my stitches into those 2 chains that are quite tight, and then I'll meet you up. Okay, so I've worked 3 double crochets now across that chain, and then we're going to work across. You should have 93. We're working across to the next chain. So I'll work across mine, and then I'll meet you up again when we get to the chain. Okay, so I counted across 93 because I just really want to make sure my stitch count is on track. And now we'll work across the chain. So we have 6 chains here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we'll just work across our double crochets. 1, they are a little tight to work into, so I'll just work them off camera. Once I get my hook into these chains, I'll meet you back up. And now we should be working into the next double crochet and working across a total again of 93 stitches. And I just like to count mine just to make sure all my stitch count is correct going forward. Okay, so I've worked around 93, and now we should have the 3 chains to work into to finish off. So 1, 2 and 3. And we'll do a reverse slip stitch join in the first double crochet. And pull that through and chain 2. Okay, so now we've worked the entire body around. If I lay this out flat, you can see. So now we can just keep working the body. Now there's a few things that you can do. You can follow along with how I do it, but this is so easy to customize. So depending on how long you want your sweater, you can play around with your color striping. So if we give this size a measure, I have about 9 inches of this color. You could choose to have equal portions of color going down your sweater. So you could do another 9 inches in this color and another 9 inches in the charcoal color. So if you were to go with that pattern, your sweater would be about 27 inches long. So that would be a fairly long sweater. So you can also do, here's another option for your color. You could just take your rows here. So you could do 7 inches, 7 inches, and 7 inches. Okay, so that would be 21 plus your collar here. So that could be another option. Another option could be to make them decline as you go. So here we could even take that we have 7. Let's say we look at just this section. Well, actually, I'll give you 2 different options. So you could go 9 inches for here, then you could drop down to 7, and then you could drop down to 5. So you would have that pattern, or you could just look at this section here, do 7, 6, and 5. Whatever. There's lots of different options to kind of get the length that you want. If you really want it to go crop, you're going to have to go a little bit shorter here. So even though we have this amount, you may only want to do 5 inches and 4 inches. It just depends really how long you would like your cardigan to end up being, but play around inch-wise because you want it to be nice and symmetrical. So if you pick going by your inches going down, it's going to give you, so whatever you decide to do, so if this is 9 inches, you do 7 next, then go with 5, okay? So that's how you can just determine. Otherwise, like we're just working now we're working 198 stitches for the medium size just in the round now. That's all we're doing. So depending on how much of the orange color, the rust color that you want, you then can change over to your next color. And what I am suggesting, so this is our, let's give this a measure here. So it's about 1.75 inches. I'm going to do my band at the bottom the same. So you want to include that in your charcoal color. So if you're making any alterations for your rows, you're going to want to include that 1.75 inch of band. Okay, so that's another thing to take into consideration. So I am going to keep working. I'll pop up some directions on how I'm going to do my size. So if you like the pictures that I've modeled, you like that length, and you're making the same size, then just go and follow along with what I'm doing. But I really want you to feel like you can customize this sweater, that if it's too cropped for you, you can make it longer. You can really make it any length you want. So I want you to feel confident to just play around with the color pattern, how you would like your sweater to fit. Okay, so here's my work so far on the body. So I did a total of 16 rows of the brindle. And now I've done 8 rows in the charcoal. So what I'm going to do at this point now is start working on the band. So I'm just going to finish off. So this is my 8th round of my 3rd color. So now for the band, I want it to be the same size as the collar. Okay, so for the band, I want you to change over to your smaller hook, so your 4mm G hook, and we're going to chain out 12. And then we'll work a half double crochet in the 3rd chain from the hook. Work your half double crochets down the chain. So you should have 10 in total. So there's 2, 3, and 10. Okay, and then we can skip over the first stitch and we'll slip stitch into the next 3. 1, 2, 3. We'll turn and work now in the back loops only. So half double crochets in the back loop only. So just like we started with our collar, I want you to do the same type of band. It's just now we're joining it as we go. So work all the way across. At the end, I'll just chain 1 and turn, and then we'll work half double crochets in the back loops all the way down. And just keep your count, your stitch count, so that you're sure that you're doing 10. Okay, so I've gotten down 10 stitches, and now we'll slip stitch across or to the next 3 stitches. 1, 2, and 3. Turn, throw yarn to the back, and then we'll continue, oops, a half double crochet. We'll continue working half double crochets in the back loop. So for a single crochet band, we would normally just be slip stitching into 2, but for a half double crochet, we'll slip stitch across 3 because we have about 2 rows of half double crochet would be equal to 3 stitches. So we're just going to continue now in this manner around the entire bottom of the sweater. It's going to take a little bit of time. I'm going to work that up off camera, and then I'll meet you up again. Okay, so I have worked around the entire base of the sweater. So it's ended up being 132 rows. So now follow along with your size, but basically the math on that is 198 stitches for the body divided by 1.5 should give you the number of rows we need to do in half double crochet for this band. So now what we're going to do is just slip stitch it together. So now this is the right side, the outside of our work. What we want to do is fold that the right sides are facing. And then we'll just slip stitch together. So we're going to go through the first stitch on this side of the ribbing, going through the first stitch over here, and just slip stitch. Go through the next stitch and the next stitch of the ribbing, and we're just working it in this manner. So just slip stitch it together. You could also whip stitch it together if you wanted, but rather than fastening off and having to get your yarn needle, this is just a quick, easy way to do it. Then we can just fasten this off and weave in that tail. Okay, so that's just really going to seamlessly blend and you can just weave in this tail, and then I'm going to show you how to join on to finish the sleeves. Okay, so I'm going to show you how great this sleeve, I already worked one sleeve, but we're going to work them the exact same way. So I'm going to show you how to join on and do this one. I'm loving, absolutely loving how this sweater is coming out. So for the sleeve, I worked the same amount of rows in the orange color. So in this color, I worked the same amount so that they lined up. Now, because the sweater, I chose to do more of a cropped look, this is much longer, and I still love the look of how this is, where this all looks even, and then this just goes a little bit longer. And then I finished off a nice tight cuff to give this a real balloon sleeve look. So it works out really well, and it's so simple. Again, we're just working in rounds. And what we're gonna do is join in. So you're gonna do this the same way for both sleeves. So it's okay that you missed me working the one. So we're gonna go back again to the larger hook. So the body's all worked in the larger hook. And if you remember, we had 69 stitches for our sleeve, plus our 6 chains. So what I want you to do is find where would be your 6 chain section. We worked into that chain 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 when we worked the body. So it's really kind of easy to see. You can just judge by those stitches where you need to join in. So we're just going to join in right in the center of that underarm. Okay, and I'll chain 2. And then we're just going to start working around. So with our 69 stitches plus our 6 chains, you want to have 75 stitches worked around for the arm. When you get over to this section, you just want to really look at where your stitches have gone into. So this is the first available stitch. So just make sure you're not adding extra stitches, that you are going in to this stitch here. So work across your 3, 1, 2, 3, and then the 4th stitch is going there. Now, as you can see, that does sort of leave a little bit of a gap. So just a trick you could do to close that in is still work into that stitch, but do a decrease across over, and that might kind of help close it in a little bit. You may need to do a little bit of weaving. As you see, we have this tail just to close in anything extra that you have there. Even this is kind of just the fiddly little finishing bits that just sometimes make everything, saves you time if you just kind of know, okay, well, maybe we'll decrease there, and then here as well, so that we still only have those 4 stitches, but we've maybe closed in some of those gaps. Ultimately, you want to make sure that you work around that you've got 75 stitches in total for the arm, for the size we're working on. Follow along with your pattern for the size. So now what I have done is, if you count out, we did 16 rows in total. So I'm just counting from here. Now it'll be actually only 15, but I'm counting including this round as well when I count the amount that we're going to do in the second color, our color B, or the orange color. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So including this round, you'll work 16, and you're going to work them all at 75 stitches. Now, I was working away on my sleeve and I didn't keep count. I didn't keep track of my stitch count, and I somehow ended up losing some stitches along the way when I got down here. And because it's a sleeve that could narrow out, I'm not going to worry about it. It's not a big deal. If you wanted to make your sleeve more narrow and not so balloon, that's what you could do. You could decide to slightly decrease as you work down. I suggest doing it evenly, spacing out your decreases, but like how I ended up not keeping track, I lost a few stitches, and that's fine. It's really not a big deal. And I'm just going to make my sleeve match the one that I already did. But as the pattern's written, you're just going to continue to work 75 stitches the entire length of the sleeve. And if you decide that you want a bit of a decrease, then go ahead and do that. It's not a big deal at all. And it's not a big deal if you end up like me and lose a couple stitches along the way. But if you don't want to lose stitches, I suggest counting. I think I was probably in the car a bit, watching TV a bit, and I just wasn't paying attention. And I didn't want to rip it back. I mean, you could rip it back if you do that, but I thought it doesn't matter. It's only a few stitches. So I'm going to continue now working around. I'm going to meet you at the other side. Okay, so I kept count as I went around, and I've ended with 75 stitches. I'll do that reverse slip stitch to join. Chain 2. And now the easy part, we're just going to work double crochets into every stitch around. So now our stitches are established. Keep track of your stitch count. Unless you want to alter it up and make some changes, but otherwise stay at that 75 stitch count. And so what you'll do is work a total of 16 rounds, so 15 since we started the sleeve, and then we'll switch back over to the charcoal. So go ahead then and just change over to the charcoal. Like I've already shown you, you're going to continue working. I believe I worked a total for my sleeve length of 22 rows in the charcoal. So 16 in total, or 15 from when we start the sleeve, and then 22. Now this is where though you can try on your sweater as you go, and that's exactly what I did. I just tried it on to see the length of sleeve that I wanted, and I'm gonna measure it out here for you just so you can see what I ended up with. All of this, of course, will be in the pattern with the schematic and how you can alter it, but really it's so easy just to try on as you go with the top down. So you can go from the underarm, but I know that if we go here, I'm looking at about 16 and a half. If I come over and just go to this row, yep, it's about 16 and a half is my sleeve length. So if you need to go longer, go longer. If you've changed anything over here on the body, like if you've done a bigger orange section, make sure you do that on your sleeve as well. If you've gone longer here, it's not going to matter a whole lot because you can go as short or long as you want on the sleeve. But again, it's just a try on as you go and see what kind of fit you want for your sweater. So I would just add, if you want this area to end up being even, I would just do your extra or your less with your charcoal section, and then it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to go ahead and work up my orange section and the charcoal section, and then because it's all going to be at the same stitch count, and then I'll just meet you up to show you how to cuff it off. And I decreased every other stitch because I really wanted this cuff to be tight. So you can also alter that up depending on what you prefer. But what I did is I just skipped every other stitch with a single crochet round, and then I just did the join as you go ribbing just like I did down here, but I will meet you up for that section. Okay, so I finished up my sleeve. I've worked 22 rounds in the charcoal. Now what we're going to do is we will be switching over to the smaller hook, but I'm first going to do a round of single crochet before we begin. Before we change over for the band. So let's chain one. We're going to work a single crochet in every other stitch around. So single crochet, skip a stitch, single crochet, skip a stitch, and complete that all the way around. Okay, so you'll work all the way around, then we're going to slip stitch in the first single crochet to join. So now at 75 stitches, you should, half of that is 37.5, so you can round that up or go down, so either 37 or 30. I suggest rounding up to the 38 stitches so that you have an even number for working the band. So now you're going to switch over to the smaller hook for working your band, and we're going to chain out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then in the third chain from the hook, we'll work a half double crochet. So you want to be working 10 stitches for the band, the cuff. So I'll work that down and then I'll meet you up at the base. Now what we'll do is skip the first stitch, but then we're going to slip stitch into the next 3. 1, 2, 3. Because we'll be working 2 rows for every 3 stitches along the bottom. So now we'll work half double crochets in the back loop only, completing the band, and we're going to work this all the way around. So I'll just work through a couple more rows here with you. So we'll work up, and I just really like to count as I go so I don't miss a stitch. So you want to make sure your stitch count stays at 10 stitches. And we'll chain 1 and turn, work a half double crochet and eat in the back loops of each stitch across. Slip stitch in 3 across the base, and then we're just going back and we're working up and down until we have worked all the way around. Okay, so once you've worked all the way around, we're going to slip stitch we'll slip stitch the band together. I'm just going to fold it so that I have fold it over so the right sides are facing. I know it's really hard to see with this dark yarn. But what you're gonna do is just slip stitch it together. You could also whip stitch it, but this way you don't have to fasten off or do anything. So I'm gonna chain 1. Go through the back loop and the stitch on that side. So just slip stitch by going through the back loop and then going over to that starting chain. Okay, and we're just going to slip stitch all the way down, and then you can weave in your tails. So once your sweater is complete, you have a couple options for blocking. You can go ahead and steam block, lay your sweater out to measurements and block it, or you can put your sweater into some lukewarm water, allow it to soak in a little tiny bit of dish soap, or you can get some wool wash, and I will link that in the description box. So just allow it to soak for around 20 to 30 minutes. Then you want to remove your sweater from the water. Make sure to squeeze out as much as you can. I like to wrap it in a towel just to get any excess water out, and then you can lay it down on your mat to measurements and just allow it to fully dry. So either method is fine. Of course, just be careful when steaming your garment just to make sure not to damage your yarn. So I used wool yarn for this design. So this is hand wash and lay flat to dry only. Another tip for your wool sweaters is you can put them in a Ziploc bag and also put them in the freezer to kill off any bacteria or odors. So that's another tip, that if you don't want to wash it, but you just want to get out any odors, that is a way that you can do that. But just using the wool wash, same blocking method, just putting it in some lukewarm water with the wool wash and then laying it flat to dry is how you want to care for this sweater. But if you go over to the blog, I do have some non-wool alternative substitutes there that if you would prefer. I know some of you do have allergies to the wool, so there are other options that you can use for this design, and they will turn out beautiful as well. If you are looking for your own substitute, just try and find a number 1, which is a fingering weight yarn. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel and tap the bell so you stay updated on all my new videos and tutorials. Thanks so much, guys. Have an awesome day.